In the bustling coastal province of Guangdong, China, in the late 18th century, a young woman named Zheng Yi Sao was born into a world ruled by men tradition and social hierarchy. She came from humble beginnings, her family involved in small-scale trade and local maritime activities. Life was difficult for those without influence, yet the sea offered freedom that the land never could. From an early age, she developed a fascination with ships, tides, and the endless possibilities that the ocean represented. Zheng Yi Sao was not like other girls of her era. While most were trained for domestic duties, she learned to navigate waterways, observe the behaviors of sailors, and understand the subtle currents of commerce and local politics. She was intelligent, perceptive, and fearless, traits that would later define her legendary rule. Her journey into piracy began with her marriage to Zheng Yi, a notorious pirate who commanded a fleet in the South China Sea. This union was more than a marriage of convenience. It was the beginning of her immersion into the ruthless world of piracy. Zheng Yi's fleet was formidable, but its strength relied heavily on him alone. The men respected him, feared him, and followed his orders, but the structure was fragile, and leadership depended entirely on loyalty to a single figure. Zheng Yi Sao quickly understood the limitations of this model. While other pirate wives may have remained in the shadows, she actively engaged with the fleet. She observed the captains, studied the strategies used in raids, and learned how information flowed through the ranks. She noticed patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities that others overlooked. Where Zheng Yi relied on brute force, she understood the subtle art of control psychology, strategy, and foresight. The South China Sea itself was a world of opportunity and danger. Trade routes stretched across hundreds of miles, connecting China, Southeast Asia, and even Europe. Merchants carried vast wealth, spices, silk, tea, silver, and pirates were constantly seeking ways to intercept it. But Zheng Yi Sao noticed that most pirates operated chaotically. Loot was stolen and wasted, discipline was absent, and internal conflict was common. She realized that a new kind of piracy was possible, one that combined strategy, discipline, and vision. When Zheng Yi passed away suddenly, the fleet faced a crisis. Without their leader, disarray threatened to dismantle their power entirely. Captains debated succession, some plotting to seize control, others considering abandoning piracy altogether. It was in this critical moment that Zheng Yi Sao revealed her extraordinary vision. She stepped forward, not as a widow seeking sympathy, but as a strategist ready to take command. Her rise to power was met with skepticism. Many men balked at the idea of taking orders from a woman. They questioned her experience, her authority, and even her right to lead. But she addressed these doubts not with words alone, but with action. She demonstrated her knowledge of every ship, every captain, and every route. She outlined plans for raids, trade control, and fleet management with precision that astonished even the most seasoned pirate captains. Her leadership style was revolutionary. Unlike many pirate leaders who ruled through intimidation alone, she combined fear with structure and fairness. Loot would be distributed according to clear rules, obedience would be rewarded, and betrayal would be punished without exception. Her system promised not only survival but prosperity for those who followed her. Slowly, skepticism turned into loyalty, and loyalty into devotion. Zheng Yi Sao's understanding of human nature gave her an edge. She knew that men feared chaos more than a woman, and that opportunity could bind ambition to her vision. She leveraged both. Ambitious captains were given responsibility, tasks that challenged them but kept them under her control. Misbehaving crews were disciplined immediately, ensuring that fear reinforced obedience rather than rebellion. By balancing punishment with reward, she created a culture of discipline that was unprecedented among pirate fleets. Her first acts of authority were strategic. She reorganized the fleet, dividing ships into squadrons, each led by trusted captains who were loyal not just to her name, but to her system. She introduced training and drills, ensuring that even in battle, her fleet could operate with precision rather than chaos. Intelligence gathering became central. She stationed spies in ports, collected information on merchant routes, and monitored enemy fleets. By the time her rivals realized she was in charge, she already controlled the key levers of power. Zheng Yi Sao's rise also relied on her economic genius. She understood that fear alone would not secure loyalty or influence. She needed wealth, resources, and the ability to distribute them strategically. Coastal villages were offered protection in exchange for tribute. Merchants were allowed safe passage under strict guidelines. And even rival pirates were co-opted into her network through controlled alliances. Money became a tool for loyalty, and prosperity reinforced her authority. One of the most remarkable aspects of her early reign was her ability to command respect, despite the gender norms of the time. While men mocked the idea of a female pirate leader, she demonstrated competence, intelligence, and decisiveness far beyond most of her male counterparts. Over time, even the most skeptical captains acknowledged her brilliance. Her name became synonymous with fear, respect, and inevitability. Zheng Yi Sao also understood the importance of perception. She maintained visibility when necessary, but often allowed her presence to remain a mystery. Stories of her actions, her fleet's movements, and her ability to predict rivals' strategies spread the South China Sea, amplifying her reputation. Sailors, merchants, and officials whispered her name, unsure whether she was watching them or orchestrating events from a distance. This aura of omnipresence reinforced her control. By the time her leadership was firmly established, the foundation of what would become maritime empire was laid. The fleet was organized, the captains disciplined, and the rules clearly defined. Her spies and intelligence networks were operational, and her economic system ensured that wealth flowed into her hands and loyalty was maintained. Within months, a chaotic pirate band had transformed into a disciplined, efficient, and loyal force capable of dominating the South China Sea. After Zheng Yi Sao assumed control of the fleet, the true challenge began. Leading a pirate band of thousands is far more complex than raiding a merchant ship. Fleets this large, comprising tens of thousands of men, hundreds of ships, and dozens of captains, are inherently chaotic. Ambition, greed, and rivalry are constant threats. Zheng Yi Sao knew that without discipline and structure, her newly acquired power could collapse in a single mutiny. From the very beginning, she implemented a system unlike any pirate fleet the South China had ever seen. Most pirate crews functioned through fear alone. Leaders would strike brutally, loot haphazardly, and punish indiscriminately. Chaos ruled the seas and loyalty was fleeting. Zheng Yi Sao recognized that fear alone could not sustain a massive empire. It needed to be coupled with fairness, rules, and clear incentives. She introduced a codified pirate law, a written and oral code that every captain and crew member was required to understand. This code covered everything from loot distribution to combat rules, from daily duties to punishments for betrayal. Every ship carried a copy, and every captain had to swear allegiance not just to her, but to the system itself. This was the first step in transforming a chaotic mob into a disciplined, almost military force. Loot was distributed systematically. No captain could hoard wealth, no crew could take more than their share. And disputes were resolved under the fleet's regulations. By ensuring fairness, she eliminated internal conflict that might otherwise lead to mutiny. Crews learned that obedience and cooperation were more profitable than greed or selfishness. Her genius lay in understanding human psychology. Reward loyalty, enforce rules, and even the most ambitious men will follow. Punishments were harsh, consistent, and unavoidable. Theft, desertion, betrayal, or insubordination were met with immediate consequences. Some captains were publicly stripped of rank, crews were disciplined on the spot, and traitors faced death or exile. There were no exceptions. Even her closest allies were held accountable. This created an atmosphere of predictability and order. Men knew the consequences of failure, and this knowledge instilled obedience without the need for constant supervision. Daily operations were also structured. Ships were divided into squadrons, each with clear responsibilities. Supplies and communication were organized meticulously. Training became a routine. Sailors drilled for battle, repaired their vessels, and maintained readiness at all times. Intelligence gathering was constant. Spies and informants reported on enemy movements, merchant fleets, and potential threats. No ship left harbor unprepared. And no operation was executed without thorough planning. Zheng Yi Sao's discipline extended beyond her fleet. Coastal villages and trading towns were integrated into her system. Tribute was expected, but protection was guaranteed in return. Merchants followed her rules, knowing that compliance meant safety and prosperity. By controlling trade and civilian relations, she strengthened her influence without firing a single cannon. Her empire was not just military, it was a controlled ecosystem where wealth, fear, and loyalty interlinked. Even rival pirates recognized her methods. Fleets that once operated independently were impressed or terrified by her efficiency. Where they relied on brute force and luck, she relied on structure, foresight, and intelligence. Her ability to maintain cohesion among tens of thousands of men made her legend grow even in the earliest days of her command. Her system also encouraged ambition, but within limits. Talented captains were rewarded with authority and responsibility, but never allowed enough power to challenge her. Crews who excelled in raids or intelligence gathering received bonuses and privileges, reinforcing loyalty while channeling ambition into productivity. This delicate balance of fear and reward was one of her greatest innovations. To ensure compliance, Zheng Yi Sao monitored every aspect of her empire. Spies reported not only on rivals and enemies but on her own men. Suspicious behavior whispered complaints, or secret alliances were detected early. Minor infractions were corrected immediately, and potential threats neutralized before they could escalate. This internal surveillance created a self-regulating system. Obedience was enforced, and the fleet essentially policed itself, under the shadow of her authority. Even at sea, she turned the environment to her advantage. Knowledge of tides, hidden coves, and local geography allowed her fleet to strike decisively and vanish without trace. Rival fleets were lured into traps, supply lines disrupted, and entire operations foiled before engagement. Discipline allowed her to coordinate hundreds of ships simultaneously, a feat unmatched by any contemporary naval force. Her reputation spread fast. Captains whispered of her strict laws, her intelligence networks, and her ability to maintain order. Villages and towns paid tribute willingly, recognizing that resistance was costly and compliance rewarding. Rival pirates either joined her willingly or were destroyed systematically. The combination of fear, discipline, and fairness ensured that her empire expanded without constant bloodshed. The psychological impact of her leadership was immense. Men feared punishment, but they also trusted the system. Loyalty was not blind, it was rational. Her empire thrived because her men understood the benefits of obedience, and her enemies feared the inevitability of failure. By making consequences predictable and rewards transparent, she had created the most efficient pirate organization in history. Zheng Yi Sao's genius was not limited to ships, cannons, or wealth. She understood that true power lay in knowledge. Armies can be destroyed, fleets sunk, and ports captured, but information, when wielded correctly, makes an empire untouchable. From the earliest days of her rule, she focused on building an intelligence network that spanned the South China Sea, turning what others saw as chaos into a predictable system under her control. Unlike other pirate leaders who relied on brute force alone, Zheng Yi Sao recognized the limitations of attacking blindly. Knowledge of enemy movements, merchant routes, coastal defenses, and political alliances could make the difference between victory and disaster. She began recruiting spies, scouts, and informants long before a raid was planned, ensuring that her empire always moved with foresight rather than reaction. Her intelligence system was surprisingly sophisticated. Fishermen and traders, often overlooked by other fleets, became her eyes on the water. They reported ship movements, cargo details, and even the mood of rival crews. Villagers along trade routes provided insights about officials, shipments, and possible threats. Every piece of information was carefully logged, cross-verified, and fed into a growing web of intelligence that allowed her to anticipate events weeks before they happened. Zheng Yi Sao also recruited human assets in places where others would never think to look. Women, underestimated in a male-dominated society, were trained to gather information in taverns, markets, and social gatherings. They listened to conversations, memorized critical details, and reported back with precision. Young men disguised as traders or sailors infiltrated enemies and rival fleets, observing operations, tracking patterns, and passing information along unseen. Even officials and corrupt officers became instruments in her network. She offered rewards for loyalty, or quietly hinted at ruin for betrayal. Those who complied became double agents, feeding false information to rival empires or relaying intelligence about enemy plans. In every layer of her empire, information flowed both ways: outward to manipulate enemies, inward to monitor her own fleet, and across her network to reinforce loyalty. By controlling intelligence, Zheng Yi Sao controlled reality itself. She never moved blindly. When she launched a raid, she already knew the size of the enemy fleet, the strength of their defenses, and the most profitable cargo to target. Ambushes were planned with precision, and the smallest details, tides, winds, or hidden reefs, were exploited to ensure her success. Rival pirates often found themselves defeated not because they were weak, but because they were predictably outmaneuvered. Disinformation became another weapon in her arsenal. False reports of ambushes, decoy ships, and phantom attacks were fed to enemy fleets, sowing fear and confusion. Entire navies retreated before engagement, convinced that a trap awaited them. By the time they realized the truth, it was already too late. Fear of the unseen, coupled with the inevitability of her strikes, made her name legendary across the South China Sea. Even within her own fleet, Zheng Yi Sao used intelligence to maintain order. Captains were constantly monitored, crews reported on each other, and loyalty was tested discreetly. Any hint of rebellion or disobedience was detected early and neutralized before it could threaten the fleet's cohesion. This internal surveillance ensured that her empire remained disciplined from the inside out, even as it expanded rapidly. Her intelligence network also allowed for economic dominance. She tracked trade shipments, and identified the most lucrative targets. Tribute payments were monitored for compliance, and merchants were encouraged to report any suspicious activity. By combining military, economic, and intelligence systems, she created a self-reinforcing cycle of control: wealth-funded loyalty, loyalty protected intelligence, and intelligence secured further wealth. Zheng Yi Sao's mastery extended beyond the present moment. She anticipated enemy strategies, predicted potential mutinies, and evaluated long-term political shifts. By analyzing patterns in trade, fleet movements, and regional politics, she could foresee conflicts before they materialized. When rival empires deployed fleets against her, she often already knew their intentions, composition, and weaknesses, rendering their massive resources ineffective. Her psychological acumen was equally impressive. The mere rumor of her omnipresence caused hesitation and fear. Sailors and commanders believed she could be everywhere at once, making mistakes costly. Entire operations were abandoned without confrontation, as opponents feared traps, ambushes and unseen spies. Her reputation became a force multiplier. Knowledge, strategy and fear intertwined to make her untouchable. Zheng Yi Sao also applied intelligence to expand her empire without bloodshed. Villages surrendered upon learning she was approaching. Merchants paid tribute willingly, and rival pirates sought alliances instead of conflict. By leveraging information, she often avoided battles entirely, achieving dominance through perception and strategic positioning rather than combat alone. Her spies worked tirelessly to map the political and social landscape of every coastal town, port and merchant hub. Every alliance, every trade route, every official's allegiance was monitored. This meticulous approach ensured that no decision was made in ignorance, and that every operation, whether military or economic, was executed with maximum efficiency. The intelligence network also served as a check on her own power. By gathering information on her captains, officers, and crews, she identified emerging threats before they became serious. Ambitious captains were given responsibility, but under observation. Crews were rewarded for loyalty but closely watched. Betrayal, inefficiency, or negligence could not hide from her system. She created an environment in which every member operated under the invisible gaze of her authority. Through her mastery of intelligence, Zheng Yi Sao transformed piracy into governance. Her fleet was not merely a collection of ships, it was a living, adaptive network, capable of responding to threats, exploiting opportunities, and maintaining loyalty with precision. She turned human behavior, information flow, and perception into tools as lethal as any cannon or blade. By the end of this phase of her reign, Zheng Yi Sao had achieved the unimaginable. A pirate empire that could not be attacked blindly, infiltrated easily, or intimidated effectively. Her enemies were always one step behind her captains loyal, and her influence extending across hundreds of miles of the South China Sea. Powerful truth: Zheng Yi's greatest weapon was knowledge. Ships, cannons, and treasure were important, but intelligence allowed her to orchestrate an empire that was not only powerful but virtually untouchable. The invisible hand of her strategy, information networks, and foresight ensured that her rule would not be challenged easily, and set the stage for the golden age of the Pirate Queen, whose legend continues to inspire awe even centuries later. By the time Zheng Yi Sao had solidified her rule over the fleet, her empire was more than just disciplined. It was a force of nature on the South China Sea. Tens of thousands of men, hundreds of ships, and countless loyal captains answered to her command. But organization alone was not enough. To maintain power and grow her influence, she needed to dominate the seas through precise raids, strategic battles, and the creation of a reputation that could instill fear before any engagement even began. Her approach to naval warfare was revolutionary. Where most pirate leaders relied on sheer numbers or brute force, Zheng Yi Sao emphasized strategy, coordination, and perception. Every ship had a role, every captain had orders, and every maneuver was calculated to maximize advantage while minimizing risk. She transformed her fleet from a chaotic band of pirates into a naval machine capable of outflanking and outrouting imperial navies. The South China Sea, with its labyrinth of islands, hidden coves and treacherous reefs, became her greatest ally. Zheng Yi Sao knew every channel, current, and tidal pattern. Enemy fleets unfamiliar with the waters often found themselves trapped or stranded, while her agile ships slipped through the narrowest passages. Striking at opportune moments, geography was weaponized, and her knowledge of it allowed her to dictate the terms of engagement. Before every raid, she conducted meticulous reconnaissance. Scouts and spies gathered intelligence on merchant vessels, convoy schedules, and naval patrols. Captains were briefed with precise details: the number of enemy ships, crew strengths, weaponry, and weaknesses. by the time the fleet moved into position, the outcome was often predetermined. She treated each raid like a chess match, anticipating enemy moves and setting traps that left them no escape. Zheng Yi Sao also introduced innovative fleet formations. Ships were arranged to maximize both offense and defense, with faster vessels serving as decoys or flanking units, while heavily armed ships formed the core of the attack. Coordinated signals allowed her fleet to respond instantly to changes, ensuring adaptability even mid-battle. Rival fleets, unaccustomed to such coordination, were often thrown into chaos at the first sign of engagement. Her economic raids were equally precise. Zheng Yi Sao targeted not just ships, but resources and trade networks. Merchants carrying precious cargo were intercepted strategically, supply lines disrupted, and tribute collected systematically. By combining military action with economic intelligence, she ensured that every raid reinforced both her power and her empire's sustainability. Wealth flowed into her hands, loyalty was rewarded, and enemies were weakened without unnecessary destruction. The psychological dimension of her naval dominance cannot be overstated. Zheng Yi Sao cultivated an aura of inevitability. Rumors of her fleet speed, precision, and omnipresence spread faster than the wind. Sailors and merchants believed she could strike anywhere at any time. Entire convoys surrendered without a fight, and rival pirates abandoned raids for fear of ambush. By manipulating perception, she often won battles without firing a single cannon. When direct combat was unavoidable, Zheng Yi Sao demonstrated unmatched tactical brilliance. She studied enemy fleets meticulously, noting the weaknesses of their captains, the morale of their crews, and even the cultural habits that could be exploited. Her strikes were surgical. Command ships were targeted first, isolated units were ambushed, and supply vessels were destroyed to cripple enemy endurance. Casualties in her fleet were minimized, while the enemy often suffered catastrophic losses. Even imperial navies were no match for her strategy. Qing dynasty fleets, British East India Company convoys, and Portuguese squadrons attempted to challenge her. Each engagement followed a similar pattern. Zheng Yi Sao anticipated their moves, manipulated information, exploited geography, and executed attacks with precision. Entire operations collapsed before they could achieve their objectives, leaving commanders humiliated and morale shattered. She also innovated in the logistics of naval warfare. Supply management, ship repair, and crew readiness were organized to perfection. Ships never left harbor unprepared, and even extended campaigns were sustainable due to meticulous planning. Her captains knew that operational discipline meant survival, and crews understood that efficiency ensured reward. The combination of logistics, strategy, and intelligence made her fleet self-sustaining and deadly. Zheng Yi Sao's mastery extended beyond combat to alliances and intimidation. Coastal towns, villages, and rival pirate groups were coerced or persuaded into submission through a combination of threat and incentive. Tributes, trade protection, and shared loot became tools to expand influence without unnecessary conflict. Her empire was growing not just through conquest, but through strategic integration of resources and loyalty. By controlling the seas, she created a system where opposition was not just defeated, but rendered irrelevant. Rival fleets learned that resistance was costly, merchant convoys preferred compliance, and the flow of trade and tribute reinforced her authority. The South China Sea became, effectively, a domain under her invisible rule. Even within her fleet, Zheng Yi Sao maintained strict discipline during raids and battles. Captains were held accountable for the performance of their units. Crews were rewarded for bravery and efficiency, and mistakes were punished swiftly but fairly. This ensured that operations were executed flawlessly, and that no internal rivalries could compromise the fleet's strength. Her naval dominance was also a demonstration of long-term strategy over short-term gains. While other pirates sought immediate plunder, she planned raids to maximize both profit and influence. Each engagement strengthened her reputation, consolidated loyalty, and expanded control over strategic waterways. By combining foresight, precision, and psychological mastery, she transformed piracy into governance at sea. Zheng Yi Sao was not merely a pirate, she was a master of naval warfare, logistics, and strategy. Her raids and battles were lessons in precision, foresight, and control. Her fleet was a machine, her captains disciplined, and her enemies outmaneuvered at every turn. By commanding the seas, she cemented the foundation of an empire that would endure, ensuring her place as the most powerful pirate in history. By now, Zheng Yi Sao's empire had become a force unlike any the South China Sea had ever witnessed. Her fleet was disciplined, her captains loyal, and her intelligence network unmatched. But maintaining dominance required more than sheer power, it demanded constant adaptation, foresight, and the ability to respond to both internal and external threats. Every day presented new challenges: rival pirates seeking to exploit weaknesses, merchant convoys attempting to bypass her control, and distant empires testing her authority. Zheng Yi Sao understood that the expansion of her influence depended on a delicate balance between fear, respect, and strategic diplomacy. Her first priority was consolidating her empire's reach across critical maritime routes. These channels were arteries of wealth, carrying goods from China to Southeast Asia and beyond. Merchants who once navigated freely were now compelled to comply with her regulations. She established a system in which compliance brought safety and profit, while defiance invited swift and decisive retaliation. Captains were given orders to patrol designated zones, intercept unauthorized shipments, and report any suspicious activity. This network of control extended her reach far beyond the immediate presence of her ships. Zheng Yi Sao's understanding of human nature allowed her to leverage both loyalty and ambition within her ranks. Talented captains were rewarded with autonomy over squadrons, shares of loot, and recognition that elevated their status among peers. At the same time, she monitored every action closely, ensuring that ambition never became rebellion. Her ability to balance opportunity with oversight created a culture in which loyalty was ration-guided, and her authority remained absolute. Her empire also expanded through alliances. Rival pirate fleets, recognizing the futility of open confrontation, often sought collaboration rather than conflict. Zheng Yi Sao treated each overture strategically. Some were absorbed fully into her network, their captains given ranks and responsibilities under her command. Others were allowed to operate semi-independently, believing they retained autonomy, while she subtly guided their actions to align with her broader strategy. Through these calculated partnerships, she extended her influence without unnecessary battles, transforming potential threats into tools of empire building. She also exploited divisions among her enemies. Competing merchant guilds, rival pirate factions, and foreign naval powers were encouraged to distrust each other. False intelligence, rumors of betrayal, and well-timed misinformation sowed confusion and hesitation. By the time opponents realized her true strength, they were often too disorganized to mount an effective challenge. Her genius lay not just in winning battles, but in shaping the perception of inevitability, making compliance seem safer than resistance, and rebellion seem suicidal. Every raid she orchestrated served multiple purposes. Beyond immediate profit, raids reinforced discipline, tested loyalty, and expanded her reputation. Crews were trained to execute precise maneuvers. Captains were evaluated on leadership and initiative, and intelligence gathered during operations informed future campaigns. Even unsuccessful raids were valuable. Mistakes were studied, weaknesses addressed, and morale strengthened through collective learning. This approach ensured that her fleet evolved constantly, becoming sharper, faster, and more cohesive with each engagement. Zheng Yi Sao's economic control con military dominance. Tribute from coastal towns, protection fees from merchants, and shares of intercepted cargo created a steady flow of resources. She used this love not just to reward loyalty, but to reinforce her infrastructure. Ships were repaired, crews supplied, and intelligence operations funded. Every coin circulating in her empire served a purpose, ensuring that prosperity reinforced obedience and expanded influence. Psychologically, her presence dominated the seas even when she was physically absent. Rumors of her fleet's speed, invisibility, and omnipresence spread among sailors and merchants alike. Convoys would alter routes. Merchants would preemptively comply, and rival pirates hesitated at the mere mention of her name. Fear became a strategic asset, amplified by precise intelligence and the visible success of her fleet. Her reputation alone could deter rebellion or inspire compliance, often more effectively than force. Internally, she maintained cohesion through strict enforcement rules, transparent rewards, and calculated punishment. Captains who exceeded expectations were elevated, crews who demonstrated loyalty received bonuses, and breaches of discipline were punished swiftly. The predictability of her system reinforced obedience, making internal challenges rare and easily neutralized. Her leadership was both feared and respected, creating an environment in which her authority was rarely questioned. The expansion of her empire was also marked by careful navigation of political and social landscapes. Coastal officials, traders, and rival factions were approached with a mix of negotiation, coercion, and subtle intimidation. Zheng Yi Sao understood that power extended beyond ships and cannons. Influence required perception, diplomacy, and the ability to manipulate networks of loyalty and fear. By controlling these dynamics, she ensured that her empire was not only dominant militarily, but entrenched socially and economically. Her strategic brilliance was complemented by her personal courage and decisiveness. She often observed raids and operations firsthand, inspiring confidence among her captains and crews. Her presence reassured the loyal, intimidated the hesitant, and demonstrated that leadership was active, not symbolic. This combination of visibility, competence, and strategic oversight reinforced the structure she had meticulously built, ensuring that her empire could function efficiently even in her absence. Rival pirates, foreign navies, and merchant convoys all learned to calculate risk based on her system. Where once chaos ruled the seas, now order dictated outcomes. Those who opposed her faced either overwhelming force, precise ambushes, or economic disruption. Those who complied enjoyed protection, shared profit, and the implicit security of her intelligence network. Her empire was self-reinforcing, resilient, and adaptive, capable of responding to threats while continuing to expand. By the end of this phase, Zheng Yi Sao's influence had extended across vast stretches of the South China Sea. Her fleet operated with military precision. Her captains executed strategies with near-perfect coordination, and her intelligence network ensured she remained steps ahead of any challenge. Rivalries were managed, alliances forged, and economic dominance secured. Through foresight, strategy, and a balance of fear and reward, she had created an empire that could withstand internal strife and external threats alike. The legend of her rise began to spread even further. Stories of the pirate queen, who commanded tens of thousands of men, who could strike anywhere at any time, and who maintained order where others found only chaos, traveled from port to port. These tales, exaggerated by fear and admiration alike, reinforced her authority and expanded her reputation. Sailors whispered, merchants complied, and enemies hesitated. Her empire's strength lay not just in its ships or wealth, but in the perception she cultivated, an aura of inevitability and dominance that few dared challenge. By the conclusion of this chapter, it was clear that Zheng Yi Sao was no ordinary pirate. She had transformed the South China Sea into a controlled domain, her fleet into a disciplined army, and her intelligence network into an invisible hand guiding every decision. Her empire was a testament to strategy, foresight, and the extraordinary ability to turn chaos into order. Where other pirates relied on chance, she relied on calculation. Where others inspired fear alone, she inspired both loyalty and respect. Her rule was absolute, her influence growing, and her legend just beginning. By the time Zheng Yi Sao's empire had reached its full operational strength, it faced challenges not from simple pirates or uncoordinated crews, but from rivals who were just as cunning, ambitious, and determined. These were men who had grown accustomed to commanding their own fleets. Men who believed that their experience, knowledge, or brute force could rival hers. Yet none fully understood the scale, precision and discipline of her empire. The South China Sea had become a chessboard, and every rival was a piece she could manipulate or neutralize. Rival pirate captains began plotting against her. They whispered in hidden coves, forging secret alliances, or recruiting disloyal men from her ranks. Some hoped to exploit moments when Zheng Yi Sao was absent, or to tempt her captains with promises of greater loot, prestige, or independence. These were not petty plots. They were sophisticated attempts to undermine the most formidable pirate empire in history. Yet Zheng Yi Sao anticipated these moves. Her intelligence network was everywhere. Every whisper, suspicious meeting, and unusual activity was reported. Betrayal, even in its earliest stages, was detected and neutralized. She turned betrayal into a strategic tool. Those who attempted subversion were allowed minor successes or minor missteps, revealing the depth of their intentions and exposing their networks. By carefully observing behavior, she could identify key conspirators without alerting them to her awareness. Once exposed, the traitors were dealt with decisively. Some were removed from positions of influence, some executed publicly to instill fear, and some coerced into loyalty through rewards or intimidation. The result was clear: rebellion was possible only if one was willing to pay the ultimate price. Zheng Yi Sao's tactical brilliance extended beyond internal threats. Rival fleets and foreign navies attempted coordinated attacks, hoping that a combination of numbers and surprise could topple her empire. Each engagement, however, revealed the depth of her preparation. She anticipated enemy formations, understood the strengths and weaknesses of opposing captains, and exploited natural conditions such as tides, wind, and hidden reefs to gain an advantage. Her fleet moved with precision, striking decisively while minimizing casualties among her own crews. Even when outnumbered, her strategies ensured victory or at least survival. She deployed decoy ships, feigned retreats, and set ambushes that leveraged the geography of the sea. Smaller, faster vessels would harass enemy flanks, while heavily armed ships formed the backbone of her assault. Signals and codes allowed simultaneous coordination across dozens of ships, leaving enemies unable to respond effectively. By the time they realized the true scale of her planning, defeat was inevitable. Her approach to conflict was also shaped by pragmatism. Zheng Yi Sao did not engage in unnecessary battles. She calculated the cost of each raid, considering crew lives, potential gain, and long-term strategic impact. When confrontation offered little advantage, she avoided it entirely, relying instead on intimidation, misinformation, or economic pressure to achieve her goals. Her enemies often found themselves thwarted without ever understanding the nature of her control, reinforcing the perception of inevitability and fear. Betrayals within her own fleet were carefully managed to strengthen her empire rather than weaken it. By exposing treachery in controlled ways, she sent a message that loyalty was rewarded and disloyalty punished. These lessons spread quickly among the captains and crews, creating a self-reinforcing culture of obedience. Ambition was harnessed rather than suppressed, and those who excelled within the system became models for others, further solidifying her control. Zheng Yi Sao also manipulated rivalries among enemies to her advantage. Competing pirate factions rival merchants, and imperial forces were encouraged, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly, to act against each other. She fed misinformation, fostered distrust, and exploited political divisions, ensuring that opponents were distracted or weakened before she needed to engage. Her mastery of human psychology was as formidable as her naval tactics. She understood that fear, ambition, and greed could be turned into tools of control and manipulation. Her intelligence network provided insight not just into enemy movements, but into the intentions and morale of her own captains. This allowed her to preempt challenges and address dissatisfaction before it escalated into rebellion. Every captain knew that she observed closely, yet also that loyalty brought reward, autonomy, and prestige. By structuring her empire in this way, she ensured that her power was secure, even as her influence expanded. The expansion of her empire brought both opportunity and danger. New territories and trade routes meant wealth, but also increased exposure to rivals, spies, and unforeseen threats. Zheng Yi Sao balanced risk with strategy, deploying her fleet to protect critical assets while extending her reach. Raids were calculated, patrols coordinated, and alliances managed to ensure maximum efficiency. Every decision reinforced the empire's stability, projecting both strength and inevitability to outsiders. Psychologically, her empire instilled both fear and respect. Merchant convoys, knowing the reputation of her fleet, altered routes or paid tribute in advance to avoid conflict. Rival pirates hesitated to challenge her, recognizing that any act of aggression was likely to backfire. Her fleet became a symbol of unstoppable power, not merely because of its size, but because of the meticulous planning, discipline, and intelligence that underpinned it. Even when facing coordinated attacks by foreign navies, Zheng Yi Sao demonstrated resilience and adaptability. She leveraged her knowledge of tides, hidden coves, and local geography to gain tactical advantages. Decoy fleets, feigned retreats, and sudden ambushes ensured that her forces could fight effectively even under numerical disadvantage. These tactics, combined with rigorous training and loyalty, made her fleet virtually invincible. Her leadership style was evident in every aspect of her empire. Discipline, intelligence, and foresight were reinforced through rewards and punishments. Ambition was directed productively, loyalty was secured through tangible benefits, and rebellion was preemptively crushed. Every captain understood the consequences of failure, yet also recognized the rewards of competence. This equilibrium created an environment where the empire operated smoothly, even amid constant threats and the unpredictable nature of the seas. Zheng Yi Sao's ability to neutralize threats, manage betrayal, and orchestrate naval supremacy ensured that her empire grew stronger with every challenge. Her influence extended across the South China Sea, dominating trade routes, intimidating rivals, and embedding her authority into the very fabric of maritime society. By the end of this period, it was clear that she was not just a pirate. She was a master strategist, tactician, and leader, whose control over men, ships, and information made her legend inevitable. The empire she commanded was resilient, disciplined, and self-reinforcing. Betrayals, rivalries, and external threats became opportunities for consolidation and growth. By turning every challenge into an advantage, she solidified her position as the most powerful pirate in history, capable of commanding loyalty, instilling fear, and orchestrating an empire that few could rival. Her brilliance lay not in brute force alone, but in her understanding of strategy, human nature, and the intricate balance of power, fear, and reward. As Zheng Yi Sao's empire matured, her focus shifted from conquest to consolidation. The South China Sea was no longer merely a domain of opportunity, it was now a complex network of territories, trade routes, fleets, and human loyalties that required careful management. The lessons of expansion had taught her that raw power alone could not sustain an empire. Structure, diplomacy and integration were equally vital. Every new territory, fleet, or alliance presented both potential and risk. And Zheng Yi Sao approached them with the precision of a master strategist. Her first priority was the integration of newly acquired territories into the fleet's operational system. Coastal villages, trading towns, and smaller pirate bands were approached strategically. Some were coerced into compliance through the threat of force, but most were persuaded through a mixture of protection, economic incentives, and the reputation of her fleet. Merchants quickly understood that paying tribute was safer than resistance, while captains recognized that aligning with her empire brought status, profit, and security. In each interaction, she balanced fear and reward, ensuring that obedience was rational rather than blind. Zheng Yi Sao's intelligence network played a crucial role in this process. Scouts, informants and spies monitored local populations, rival pirate groups, and foreign fleets. By understanding social dynamics, economic flows, and political alliances, she was able to integrate territories smoothly. Each village or town was assessed for loyalty, resources and strategic value before being formally incorporated into the empire. This careful approach minimized resistance and maximized efficiency, reinforcing the stability of her growing domain. She also strengthened her command structure to manage the expanding fleet. Captains were assigned clear responsibilities, with defined zones of control and specific duties. Communication channels were standardized, allowing rapid transmission of orders across hundreds of ships. Training drills and operational exercises became routine, ensuring that every crew member, from seasoned sailors to new recruits, understood their role in the broader strategy. Discipline was maintained rigorously, and loyalty was continually reinforced through rewards and recognition. Alliances with other pirate factions were managed with subtlety and precision. Rival captains, who opposed her, were often absorbed into her network, given autonomy over small squadrons while remaining under her overarching control. These arrangements were carefully structured to prevent consolidation of power outside her authority. By allowing ambition to flourish within controlled boundaries, she maintained loyalty and minimized the risk of rebellion. Strategic marriages, personal oaths, and ceremonial recognition further cemented these alliances, blending formal authority with cultural and social bonds. Economic management was equally sophisticated. Tribute payments, trade oversight, and shared profits were meticulously organized. Merchants understood that cooperation brought profit and protection, while defiance invited swift consequences. Loot from raids was distributed according to a strict system, balancing fairness with incentives for initiative and skill. Zheng Yi Sao ensured that wealth flowed efficiently throughout the empire, reinforcing loyalty, while strengthening operational capacity. By creating a self-reinforcing economic ecosystem, she reduced the risk of internal strife and secured long-term prosperity. Her understanding of human psychology continued to give her an advantage. Captains and crews were encouraged to demonstrate competence, initiative, and loyalty, knowing that their efforts would be recognized and rewarded. At the same time, subtle monitoring ensured that disloyalty, greed, or ambition that threatened the empire was detected early. Public examples of punishment or reward reinforced the system's rules, creating a culture in which compliance, productivity, and loyalty became instinctive. Zheng Yi Sao also focused on the cultural integration of her empire. She respected local customs and traditions in the territories she controlled, blending governance with local practices to reduce resentment. She encouraged local leaders to participate in decision-making while remaining subordinate to her authority. By balancing respect with dominance, she created a sense of legitimacy and stability, transforming conquered territories into loyal and productive parts of her empire. Military readiness remained paramount. Even as she consolidated territories, Zheng Yi Sao maintained the fleet's operational efficiency. Ships were repaired, crews trained, and supply lines maintained. Scouts continued to monitor rival fleets and merchant movements, ensuring that her empire remained responsive to both immediate threats and long-term strategic challenges. Her emphasis on preparedness allowed the empire to expand without overextending its resources, ensuring sustainable growth. Strategically, she also leveraged her reputation. Tales of her decisiveness, intelligence, and ruthless efficiency spread widely, discouraging rebellion and attracting voluntary compliance. Rivals hesitated to challenge her authority, merchants preferred cooperation, and even foreign powers approached with caution. By combining operational capability with psychological influence, she ensured that her empire's expansion was reinforced by both reality and perception. By the end of this period, Zheng Yi Sao had transformed from a widow who inherited a pirate fleet into a ruler of a vast maritime empire. Her strategic genius, understanding of human nature, and ability to balance fear, reward, and loyalty had created a system of control that extended across hundreds of miles of sea, integrated diverse populations, and outmaneuvered the most formidable adversaries. Her empire was no longer simply a collection of ships, it was an organized, disciplined, and resilient domain under the rule of the pirate queen. Her consolidation of power marked the turning point in her story. She had moved beyond survival, raids and tactical victories to a stage where governance, diplomacy, and integration defined her empire. The South China Sea was hers not just through fear, but through respect, loyalty, and the invisible architecture of strategy that she had built. Her legend was no longer confined to tales of battles or plunder. It was the story of an empire, a system, and a leader whose brilliance transcended the chaotic world of piracy to achieve enduring authority. As Zheng Yi Sao's empire continued to grow, the South China Sea became a stage not just for her dominance, but for the envy and fear of powerful rivals. Imperial fleets, rival pirate confederacies, and ambitious merchants all sought to challenge her authority, believing that her empire was vulnerable despite its reputation. They underestimated her discipline, intelligence, and foresight, and soon learned that confronting her was a dangerous gamble. Every threat became an opportunity for Zheng Yi to demonstrate her mastery over strategy, naval warfare, and human psychology. Her first encounters with major naval forces were tests of both skill and nerve. Fleets dispatched by regional governors and foreign powers attempted coordinated strikes, hoping to overwhelm her forces with superior numbers. Yet Zheng Yi Sao had prepared meticulously. Intelligence reports provided detailed knowledge of enemy fleet sizes, compositions, and tactics. Using scouts and spies, she had mapped their routes, identified choke points, and analyzed weaknesses in training and morale. Her fleet moved with precision, striking in ways that exploited these vulnerabilities and turning potential disasters into decisive victories. She applied the principles of misdirection and surprise with devastating effect. Smaller squadrons acted as decoys, luring enemy ships into traps where her main force could strike from hidden coves or behind natural barriers. Ambushes were coordinated across multiple locations simultaneously, confusing opponents and forcing them into disadvantageous positions. Even when enemies attempted to regroup or escape, they often found their routes blocked, their supply lines disrupted, or their morale shattered by relentless pressure. Her tactical genius made her victories seem effortless, though each was the result of careful planning, intelligence, and coordination. Zheng Yi Sao's psychological strategies were as crucial as her military tactics. Rumors of her omnipresence, her fleet speed, and her ability to predict enemy moves spread rapidly across ports and trading hubs. Sailors, captains, and merchants began to treat her as an unstoppable force. Entire convoys would surrender at the sight of a single flagship, believing resistance was futile. Rival pirate groups hesitated to engage, even when they outnumbered her, fearing ambushes, traps, or betrayal. By combining perception with reality, she created an aura of inevitability that amplified her power far beyond the physical strength of her fleet. When direct battles occurred, her leadership shone. She maintained strict discipline, ensuring that captains executed orders flawlessly and crews operated with maximum efficiency. Her ships were arranged to optimize both attack and defense, with faster vessels performing flanking maneuvers, decoys drawing enemy attention, and heavily armed ships forming the core strike force. Signals, flags, and trained messengers allowed simultaneous coordination across dozens of ships, something unmatched by most contemporary naval powers. Her enemies often fell into chaos within moments of engagement, unable to respond effectively to the precision and speed of her attacks. Her understanding of logistics was equally critical. Supplies, repairs, and crew readiness were meticulously managed to sustain long campaigns. Ships never ventured without proper preparation, and backup resources were always in place. This ensured that her fleet could endure prolonged engagements or extended patrols without risk of collapse. By combining discipline, logistics, and intelligence, she created a naval force that was not only powerful but adaptable, resilient, and self-sustaining. Zheng Yi Sao's victories were often amplified by strategic deception. She employed false signals, decoy ships, and controlled leaks of information to manipulate enemy expectations. Fleets were led into traps, missiled about her numbers, or tricked into overextending their forces. Even when her enemies believed they had gained the upper hand, she exploited their assumptions to devastating effect. Her ability to think several steps ahead transformed each confrontation into a test of her adversary's judgment, rather than a simple contest of firepower. The empire she commanded extended far beyond the battlefield. Coastal towns, trading posts, and smaller pirate factions were integrated into her strategic network, providing intelligence, logistical support, and additional manpower. Merchants were encouraged to comply with her regulations through protection and incentive, while those who resisted faced calculated consequences. Each engagement strengthened this network, creating a system in which every battle, raid, and maneuver reinforced her control, wealth, and influence. Her enemies attempted to exploit internal weaknesses, but Zheng Yi Sao's discipline and intelligence networks neutralized these threats. Ambitious captains, disgruntled crew members, and opportunistic rivals were identified early and managed carefully. Some were rewarded for loyalty, others punished publicly to deter dissent, and a few were eliminated to remove persistent threats. By addressing internal challenges proactively, she ensured that her empire remained cohesive even in the face of external attacks. Even foreign naval powers learned to respect, or fear, her capabilities. Convoys traveling through her controlled waters adopted circuitous routes, avoided certain ports, and paid tribute to avoid confrontation. Letters of recommendation, bribes, and local alliances were employed to gather intelligence or ensure safe passage, further consolidating her influence. Her empire's reach extended through perception, economic control, and reputation, not merely through cannon and steel. Her strategic brilliance was apparent in multi-front conflicts. At times, several fleets would attempt simultaneous strikes, testing the limits of her coordination. Yet Zheng Yi Sao managed these challenges through delegated authority, disciplined captains, and rapid communication. Each unit understood its role. Each maneuver was rehearsed, and contingencies were in place for every eventuality. This level of coordination allowed her to confront multiple threats without overextending resources, demonstrating her capacity for both operational mastery and strategic foresight. Zheng Yi Sao also leveraged economic warfare alongside naval engagements. By disrupting enemy supply lines, targeting trade convoys, and controlling key maritime choke points, she weakened opponents even without direct combat. Merchant profits were redirected into her own network, rivals were starved of resources, and morale within enemy fleets deteriorated. This approach ensured that her empire's power was reinforced continuously, with victories accumulating across both military and economic dimensions. Through these strategies she solidified her status as the most formidable pirate of her era. Her combination of discipline, intelligence, logistics, and psychological control made her empire resilient, adaptive, and virtually untouchable. Rival fleets learned that confronting her was not only dangerous but futile. While merchants and smaller pirate groups increasingly sought alliance or cooperation rather than opposition. The South China Sea was no longer a chaotic expanse. It was under the disciplined, strategic, and ever-present influence of the pirate queen. By the end of this period, Zheng Yi Sao had achieved dominance unparalleled in pirate history. Her fleet was a masterful machine of warfare, her empire a sophisticated network of loyalty, intelligence, and economic control. Battles were rarely won through force alone, instead, they were orchestrated through strategy, preparation, and the subtle manipulation of perception. Her empire thrived because she controlled both reality and the narrative, leaving rivals bewildered, allies loyal, and the South China Sea under her command. Zheng Yi Sao's ability to face major naval conflicts, neutralize threats, and maintain dominance ensured that her legend continued to grow. Her victories were recorded in whispered tales, merchant accounts, and reports from foreign powers, each reinforcing the myth of a leader whose vision, in tactical genius, exceeded that of any contemporary pirate. The pirate queen had not only survived the most dangerous maritime environment in history, she had transformed it into her own empire, absolute and enduring. By this stage, Zheng Yi Sao's empire had become vast and complex, stretching across hundreds of miles of the South China Sea and encompassing fleets, ports, towns, and thousands of loyal sailors. Yet, even as her naval dominance was uncontested, she understood that the greatest threats often came not from foreign fleets or rival pirates, but from within her own ranks. Ambition, jealousy, and the desire for independence could easily fracture her carefully constructed empire. She therefore devoted as much attention to internal politics, loyalty, and succession planning as she did to battles and raids. Her understanding of human behavior was central to her governance. She recognized that loyalty could not be demanded, it had to be cultivated, rewarded, and constantly reinforced. Captains were given autonomy over their squadrons, earning prestige, profit, and recognition, but always under the watchful eyes of her intelligence network. This balance of freedom and oversight encouraged initiative while preventing rebellion. By giving ambitious men the opportunity to shine, she ensured that their energies were directed toward strengthening the empire rather than undermining it. Zheng Yi Sao also created a tiered system of responsibility. Senior captains were entrusted with critical missions, squadron management, and even minor governance of territories. Mid-level captains managed smaller flotillas and coordinated intelligence gathering, while junior officers handled logistics and crew training. Every level of command was structured to allow for accountability, ensuring that performance, loyalty, and competence were always visible. This system created a chain of command that was efficient, transparent, and resilient to internal threats. She understood that information was a weapon not only against enemies but also within her own empire. Her intelligence network monitored the behavior of captains, officers, and crews, ensuring that ambition did not turn into rebellion, and that grievances were addressed before they escalated. Reports of dissent, disloyalty, or inefficiency were carefully evaluated, and corrective measures were applied with precision. Some were rewarded to reinforce positive behavior, while others faced punishment, reassignment, or public discipline to set an example. Every decision reinforced the rules and culture of her empire. Economic incentives played a crucial role in maintaining loyalty. Zheng Yi Sao ensured that wealth generated from raids tribute, and trade was distributed in ways that encouraged continued allegiance. Captains who excelled received additional shares, crews who demonstrated skill or bravery were rewarded, and villages or towns that complied with her regulations benefited from protection and preferential treatment. By linking prosperity directly to loyalty, she created a system in which self-interest and allegiance aligned naturally. She also managed social and cultural dynamics with sophistication. Territories under her control were encouraged to maintain local customs, provided they did not conflict with her authority. Leaders were incorporated into her network through ceremonial recognition, shared profits, and oaths of loyalty. By respecting local traditions while reinforcing her ultimate authority, Zheng Yi Sao reduced resentment and fostered voluntary compliance. Her empire operated not through constant coercion, but through a combination of respect, fear, and tangible benefits. Succession planning was another aspect she addressed with meticulous care. Recognizing that her empire would outlast her own lifetime, she identified trusted captains and advisors who could maintain stability in her absence. Authority was delegated carefully, ensuring that power was distributed among capable individuals while avoiding the concentration that could lead to rebellion. Mentorship, ceremonial acknowledgement, and incremental responsibility prepared these individuals to take on leadership roles, creating continuity and resilience within the empire. Zheng Yi Sao's personal presence remained central to maintaining loyalty. She regularly visited fleets, oversaw raids, and personally inspected ports and territories. Her visibility reinforced authority, inspired confidence, and reminded both captains and crews that leadership was active, engaged, and decisive. Even a brief appearance could strengthen morale, settle disputes, and reinforce obedience, demonstrating the psychological dimension of her control. She was also skilled at handling disputes and conflicts within her empire. Rivalries among captains, disputes over spoils, and disagreements over strategy were resolved through a combination of mediation, judgment, and strategic allocation of responsibility. By ensuring fairness while maintaining ultimate authority, she prevented minor conflicts from escalating into rebellion or fragmentation. Her empire's stability relied not only on fear and discipline, but on her ability to manage human dynamics effectively. Zheng Yi Sao's economic system reinforced her political control. Tributes, trade oversight, and loot distribution were organized in ways that created dependency and loyalty. Towns and ports that complied with her rules flourished, while defiance brought disruption or calculated punishment. By intertwining economic prosperity with obedience, she created a culture in which allegiance was rational, rewarding, and self-reinforcing. Her empire was not maintained by fear alone. It was supported by a system in which loyalty brought tangible benefits. Her intelligence network continued to be crucial. Reports from spy scouts and informants allowed her to anticipate internal challenges before they became serious. She identified potential troublemakers, monitored ambitious captains, and assessed crew morale, all while maintaining discretion to avoid creating paranoia or resentment. The result was a self-correcting system, in which threats were detected early and addressed effectively, ensuring the continued cohesion of her empire. Zheng Yi Sao also understood the importance of symbolism and narrative in maintaining loyalty. Public displays of generosity, decisive punishment, or strategic victories reinforced her reputation. Crews, captains, and allied towns internalized the lessons that obedience brought reward and rebellion brought consequences. This combination of perception and reality strengthened her authority, and ensured that loyalty was not just compliance, but a rational choice. In addition, she prepared for potential crises, Storms, disease, or unexpected attacks could disrupt even the most disciplined empire. So contingency plans were embedded at every level. Captains knew evacuation routes, supply caches were strategically located, and intelligence allowed rapid response to emergencies. This preparation minimized risk, reinforced confidence among her followers, and further demonstrated her strategic foresight. By continuously balancing ambition, loyalty and authority, Zheng Yi Sao maintained an empire that was resilient, disciplined and adaptive. Internal politics were managed not through brute force alone, but through a combination of incentives, surveillance, and strategic delegation. Every captain, officer, and crew member understood their place, responsibilities, and the consequences of their actions. Her empire functioned as a self-regulating system, capable of withstanding internal dissent and external threats alike. The result was an empire that not only dominated the South China Sea, but did so with cohesion and sustainability rarely seen in pirate history. Rival factions were absorbed or neutralized, merchant networks were integrated, and crews remained loyal despite the temptations of personal gain. Zheng Yi Sao's ability to manage complex human dynamics ensured that her empire was not only powerful in the present, but capable of enduring long into the future. By the conclusion of this period, her mastery of internal politics, loyalty management, and succession planning had transformed her empire from a formidable fleet into a stable and integrated maritime domain. Her combination of discipline, intelligence, foresight, and human understanding allowed her to maintain control across vast distances and diverse populations. The South China Sea was under her rule not only because of her ships and weapons, but because of her ability to govern, manage people, and orchestrate a system that was resilient, efficient, and enduring. Zheng Yi Sao's legacy in internal governance, political strategy, and loyalty management became as legendary as her naval victories. Her empire was a model of strategic brilliance, demonstrating that the greatest power comes not from force alone, but from the combination of foresight, intelligence, and the skillful management of human behavior. Through this approach, she ensured that her empire could thrive even in the absence of constant warfare, securing her place as the most formidable pirate and the most effective maritime ruler of her era.